Shirley, so on the day of the search warrant, she wasn't at the funeral home, so we went to her house, kind of in the county in Montrose, and her husband let us in. We sat in their living room on their couch and interviewed her for quite a while. Her emotions ranged from kind of a fake friendliness to crying and yelling during the interview at different times. She described to us the way that they conducted their business and what her involvement was, what her role was, what Megan's role was, and kind of her procedures for accepting and dismembering bodies and then shipping them. And she talked about how they kept records and kind of the manner that they kept records to what was there. At one point, it was almost like she was trying to convince us that what they were doing was for the greater good and for the benefits of science, and to find cures for diseases, and trying to shed a light or portray a light on her and her daughter that was really, she was trying to make them look really good, when in fact we knew that she's hiding and lying to us about several different things. And when she was doing that, we asked her to kind of role play what a conversation with one of the next of kin from a decedent that came in would be like, in order to bring up the topic of donation. And so she agreed to do it, and she kind of put on her smile and started off by saying, well, does your loved one have the heart on their driver's license? And so she was expressing to us that that's how she would start that conversation. And immediately, you start thinking, okay, clearly she's trying to confuse the difference between organ donation and body donation. And because the heart on the driver's license signifies organ donation. So right off the bat of her pitch, you could tell that was one of their techniques to defraud people. And that, was only if they actually ever even spoke about it. And in many of the instances, the topic of donation was never even brought up. So they just completely stole the bodies. But during that interview, she continued kind of talking about their process, and kind of unprompted, she explained that all the bodies were consented and none of them had infectious disease. She actually, at one point, kind of bragged about what she called her consentile rate. So she talked about having a 75% consentile rate, and what she meant was that 75% of the next of kin that she spoke to were consenting to donation. And she explained that happened when they were doing seminars, senior seminars. So what we had learned later is that they had hired a PR person, and Megan was really into this part of it, the public face, and they would go to different places where seniors would group, whether it was a community center or an old folks home. They would go there and they would present about donation. And we later learned that these presentations had some really deceiving parts of them, where they would present that cures were made because of, or somebody could walk again because they got a new spine, and just outlandish things that were meant to defraud these people into giving their consent for a body donation. And so so during that interview with Shirley, she explained that her consentile rate went up during the period of those seminars that they were given. Let's see, what else with Shirley? We were in her living room and she was sitting on her chair, and like I said, her emotions really ranged, and she had a blanket that she was kind of stroking the whole time. She eventually they ended the interview after we really tried to dig in more and get her to come clean about everything.
Yeah, what happened when you confronted her about it?
Well, that's when her emotions really got extra. She would cry, and then she would yell, and she would state her innocence, that there was nothing ever wrong going on, they would never do that. And eventually, I think her husband, seeing how frustrated she was and how animated she was, kind of said, "Okay, that's it, we're done. You guys got to go."